You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein on Gelt show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein on Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking to Brigadier General Maharan Prosenfer, who is the financial advisor to the Chief of Staff and the head of the Budget Department at the Ministry of Defense. The general is responsible for the management and the defense budget of Israel, which is about 50 billion shekels. In his line of work, he's also the head of the tender process of transferring large bases from the center of Israel to the Negev, which right now is a move that's of national importance. General, it's a pleasure to have you here today, and I'd like to start by asking you a question. Simply, what is the financial advisor to the Chief of Staff responsible to do?
Well, actually, the financial advisor to Chief of Staff is someone that manages the defense budget, the Israeli defense budget, and is responsible to allocate all of these resources and to put them all together and to be able to manage them not only inside the IDF but to the Ministry of Defense and to the government and the parliament, and is actually the one that deals with all the financial aspects of the defense budget, including, of course, the US aid that is about $3 billion every year.
Currently, the IDF budget, we said, is about 50 billion shekels. The Ministry of Finance constantly states that the IDF budget is rising and, in fact, should be lowered to help sustain Israel's economic growth. How do you see that?
The right way to measure the defense budget is appropriate when you see what is the GNP. And if you look the Israeli GNP 20 or 30 years ago, you would have seen that the defense budget was about 15, maybe 20% of the GDP. Nowadays, it's only about 6% from the GDP. So if we look historical, you see that there is a trend that the defense budget is always getting or decrease from the GDP. And maybe if you take the figures themselves, you would see that the figure in this year is maybe higher than the figure that was the last year. But if you take into consideration the inflation and the prices and the growth of the GDP, you would see that the defense budget is decreasing all the way down. So it's not a very right way, especially not if you see in the perspective of the economy, you see that the defense budget is decreasing and not increasing.
And how about in terms of efficiency? All of that money, one of the big problems, I can tell you certainly as a financial advisor, helping individuals deal with their own money, they tend not to be so creative and so efficient, and I would think that when you deal with a huge bureaucracy, really like the Army, it must be very, very difficult to make it as efficient as possible. How do you deal with that?
We should remember that the main goal of the IDF is to be prepared to war. And in that sense, we do all that we can to increase the operational efficiency. And this is the main goal. You should be prepared to war. Unfortunately, sometimes the IDF is in the middle of a war. So you should be all the time prepared. Now, after we know that, it is crucial that we take steps to use our budget in a very wise way. That's why we are doing streamlining processes, many processes. and we are doing that to allocate the resources in a right way. Again, to increase the operational efficiency. And I can say that in the last 3 years, we have succeeded to allocate resources of about 3.5 billion shekel from unnecessary processes to operational needs. And I think this is the example that gives how we deal with our budget.
We are talking to General Maharan Prosenfer, who is the financial advisor to the Chief of Staff and the head of the budget department at the Ministry of Defense. We're talking about the money in terms of the Army. In fact, there's a lot to cover today, so the General has agreed to be with us both on the first part and the second part of the show. In the beginning, I want to talk more about the national level, and then perhaps in the second half we'll talk about how all of the life in the Army relates to people and a lot of the Olim and Americans who are listening to this show to see how they might move up in the Army as well. But General, in terms of the big picture and the way the Army is reviewed, after the Second Lebanese War, there was a committee that was set up to analyze the needs of the Israeli Defense Forces to determine how much the IDF really needs in order to defend the country. There were a number of conclusions from that committee, and I'm just curious, what's your take on it?
Well, after the Second Lebanon War, I think we realized that the defense budget is too low and that we should take some measures to correct that. So the government of Israel has established a committee, the Brodet Committee. And the Brodet Committee recommended that there will be a multi-year budget for the Ministry of Defense. And they recommended a few other recommendations. After that, the government of Israel has approved those recommendations. Unfortunately, from that time, I can say that some of the recommendations, although they were approved by the government of Israel, we didn't succeed to fulfill them, such as although there was a recommendation for a multi-year plan and multi-year budget, the government of Israel cut the defense budget in the last 2 years. And I can say that in generally we are very happy with the Brodet recommendation, and I think it's crucial that the MOD and the IDF, that they are a very large and complicated organization, should act in an area of multi-year plans and multi-year budget. But as I said before, we didn't succeed to fulfill all the recommendation, and there is a long way that we should take still.
It's certainly normal for large organizations to take a long time to get through anything. In fact, it leads to my next question, which is running the money for the IDF must be very similar to running the money for a huge, huge corporation. Are there similarities, or is it different because this is the Army and that's military versus civilian?
There are similarities. In many aspects there are similarities, but in other aspects it's not similar at all. I said before that the main goal of the IDF is to be prepared to war. So sometimes you are ready to pay prices for the operational efficiency that a business company would not do so. And but as I said before, it's not similar also because you don't have in the end of the year profit that you should gain. But if for an organization that manage 50 billion shekel, you should manage your money very wisely. And there are other resources, not only from the government, but we have incomes from other resources. So, and you of course deal with many kinds of currencies. And in many aspects it's very similar to a business organization, but in other aspects it's not so at all.
Could you describe what those other sources of income are for the military?
For example, if we have an old equipment that we sell them to civilians, so we get the money and we do with that other things.
Excellent. So I'm very interested in buying an old F-16. So when one goes on sale, please let me know. One of the big, probably a huge expense for the IDF now is the transfer of some of the large bases to the south of Israel. How big a step really is that? And are there going to be benefits that we'll see in terms of the costs, or is it more of a strategic move, or both?
I think it is a strategic move for the IDF and the MOD, but also for the State of Israel. And it is a very huge operation. And maybe I'll give the figure. It costs for more than 30 billion shekels. And we're talking about the intelligence and the C4I and the training camps and Air Force camps and other camps maybe as well. So it is a very strategic move, and the benefit for the IDF it's not only in the infrastructure that we are reviving, but also for the Israeli economy. And if we will succeed, that not only to transfer the camps, but also that the families of the standing army will move their life to the Negev. This is the move that we are trying to do. Now, the benefit to the economy is far away or far more than the costs. Even though I said 30 billion shekel, the benefit to the economy are far more than 30 billion shekel, and it is for ages ahead.
Okay, General, we're going to take a break now. We look forward to having you back on the second half of the show. We've been talking to General Maharan Prosenfer. Sorry, I've only been in Israel about 17 years. The general is the financial advisor to the Chief of Staff and the head of the budget department at the Ministry of Defense. And we'll be right back in just a few minutes to talk a little bit more about how the IDF contributes to Israel's economy.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt show.